Welcome back to Sidewalk, Skyline podcast. Today, my guests are Thomas and Leigh-Ann Davidson. They're part of Mission Canada and serve in the small city of Cobourg, which is about 1 hour east of Toronto. They're the leaders of Hope and Light Urban Outreach, focused on the marginalized, street-affiliated, and homeless people in the small city of Cobourg. So welcome, Tom and Leigh-Ann. It's good to be with you. Good to see you again.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we've broken bread together at least once, maybe a couple times in Peterborough, and of course, Leigh-Ann was in Mission Canada earlier than Tom, who's just on his way in right now. And yeah. So before we talk about Hope and Light, which is really exciting, sometimes what's even more interesting and exciting than the work you do is the people that you are and how God shaped you and brought you to this place. It really opens up the perspective of what's in your heart that causes you to live sacrificially and to say, yeah, this is worth doing, and this is our priority. So just before we started recording, Leigh-Ann, you were explaining to me about where the two of you are sitting right now. Do you want to tell us where you are?
So we are in the sunroom section of our home, which was once enjoyed by many different things, a music room, a craft room, and it has now become the home base hub for our outreach ministry. I originally had the computer spinned around, hoping to hide the mess, but then we decided, I guess, that it's good to show you that it's kind of, our home has been filled with the work that we do, and you don't want to say no to a donation, right?
Yeah.
And so we just kind of stick it in our organized chaos.
Yeah, it's amazing how ministry gets messy, doesn't it?
It does.
And sometimes there's more than enough things to deal with. But anyways, so before we talk about Hope and Light, I want to hear some of your stories. What your life was like growing up, and your own journey to Jesus. So who wants to go first? Tom or Leigh-Ann?
I'll go ahead. So I grew up in a Christian family. Grew up on a farm kid. So pretty good life. A lot of field cars and dirt bikes and stuff like that. A lot of hunting and fishing, and So in my teens, I kind of stepped away from my faith, I guess, a little bit, and came back to it in my 30s. So that's pretty well a lot of my life right there.
So Tom, tell me about how you met Leigh-Ann.
Funny story. So we met online. We met online. She had a profile on that said I was looking for a country boy, and not a fake country boy, a real one. So she says a country boy doesn't mean driving a pickup truck and listening to country music. So of course I answered and said, I do those, but I'm also a real country boy. And so we decided we were going to meet up, and really we both just had been through some stuff, so we both knew what the other one wasn't looking for and was looking for, and it just worked out beautifully.
That's a great story, and neither of you maybe knew at the time that she was looking for a country boy that would do urban ministry.
That's right. That wasn't on the profile for sure.
No. Some things I think God grows in us, and and
Yeah,
they
for
weren't
sure.
necessarily there at the beginning. Yeah. So how about you, Leigh-Ann? Tell us about your life growing up and your journey to Jesus and your journey to Tom.
Yeah. So not quite as simple as Thomas's, family story. I grew up in a non-Christian home, and God wasn't really something we talked about very much. And so I always felt like there was this little spot that was missing. And so I tried to search for that spot. Sometimes it was a good thing I filled it with. Sometimes it wasn't a good thing I filled it with. Ended up being out of my own and homeless at 14. And so that was a little bit of a rough patch in my life. And part of my family took me in at 16 and helped me get on my feet. And I went to church with my grandma, who was the only Christian in my family, but she was in a Catholic church. We went for a very brief time, but that was really the only exposure to God that I had as a young person. So, life carries on, right? You pull up your socks. I had a child really young, single mom. Then I got married in my mid 20s. Had, that was kind of rocky. And then in this whole time, I always felt that emptiness. It didn't matter what I put in it. It wasn't ever full. And so I was searching for something different, something more. And so it wasn't until my mid 30s that I found that. But in that in between, my story is really big. So I know it seems like I'm leaping and bounding. We could fill up the hour of this podcast with my story.
And that would
I'm a
be all right.
44.
So
It would be
don't
all
worry
right. It
about
would be.
condensing.
Um, and so, I had a rough life. I had a rough life. There was family separation. There was dysfunction there, some mental health. There's addiction struggles in my family home life. Um, so, at 17, I met a fella that wasn't very nice to me either. So that through that abuse and the trauma for that, I ended up on the streets again in my early 20s. And it just took something that I couldn't understand then. I know now, all these years into faith, that God had a purpose for me even then. And even then, he was caring for me and guiding me in the purposes that he had already planned and ordained for my life. But I didn't understand it. But the searching happened even then. And so along the way, I picked up a country boy and I thought I'd keep him. So, through the messiness and that trauma, I mean, it really built who I am as a person, right? The strength that I gained from the weakness that I had only came through the grace and the glory of the Lord, right? Which I did not know when I was advertising needing a country boy on a online dating website that I didn't want anything to do with, but my girlfriend swore that I should have. And so my profile was like offensive, think non-Christian. And I'm like, if you are so and so, don't message me. And if you've done such and such, don't message me either. It was all of these reasons why a fella shouldn't pay any attention to me. It was very terrible. And here I was smart and I wasn't going to get any answers. And Thomas was very brave.
Well, being a hunter, he knows how to work stealthily.
He does. And I really believe that it was, God created this person for me to love me and in this season and in this way. And he's my best friend. And so, we got married in 2014, but it was still 4 years before I really understood the Lord. So we were baptized in 2017 as a family. Thomas rededicated his life, and our 2 youngest girls were also baptized with us. We did a river service through our church. And that is the first time the hole was starting to feel full. So I came out of that water and I just knew that the rest of my life would be very different. I didn't know why, but I did know. And so that was a big change for me.
So what town and church were you in at that time?
So I've only been at one church. So we're part of Norwood Pentecostal Church.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, the pastor was Jeff Hackett.
Mhm.
And so it was a little lake service, and I wish I could remember the name of the lake, but they did it Stony Lake. Yeah. And they did that the end of every summer was kind of a tradition in that church. So,
Wow. And being baptized together as a family, like wow, that sounds like Book of Acts stuff, doesn't it?
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a pretty awesome experience.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So once that happened and you both set your hearts to serving the Lord and your daughters joining in on that, what came next in terms of, first of all, the Lord is um, making you new, doing things inside you, and what did that lead to?
So for me, it actually led to a mission trip. So just the timing of the Lord is always so perfect, isn't it? And
Mhm.
so just as we were preparing to start serving and being part of our church, John and Julie Wright were going to Kyrgyzstan. And I was going. I didn't know why, I didn't know how, but I was going. And that experience, it changed the trajectory of my life. It really did. I had never, before that moment, I had never even left a 3-hour vicinity of Peterborough. I'd never been out of Ontario. I'd never been out of the country. And then so to go across the sea and experience a different culture in a different way was profound to me.
Yeah, and I'm assuming, Thomas, you stayed at home with the family and work while she was gone.
I did. I
Hmm.
did, yeah.
So let me ask you, Thomas. You were around at that time. You still are. And when she got in her head, she's going to Kyrgyzstan. She's going on this mission trip. What do you remember about how that affected her? Like when she got home, was something changing? Was something different than before she went? What do you remember?
Oh, absolutely. She always had a heart for helping people before she went, but even more so when she got back.
Yeah.
Um, One thing that changed in both of our lives actually is she couldn't smoke on this mission trip, and we both smoked at the time.
Hmm.
So she had told me for weeks leading up to before she went on the trip that she was going to quit smoking. And I kept saying, I'm not quitting smoking. I like smoking. So you go ahead, but I'm not. So, anyways, so the day came, she woke up in the morning. She said, all right, today's the day. I'm not smoking. And I said, well, I'm not either. And we both quit. I had
Wow.
smoked for 30 years and I was totally 100% delivered.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. And how about you, Leigh-Ann? Were you 100%
Same,
delivered,
delivered.
or
Yeah,
did you have to?
delivered. Like never
Yeah.
even, it wouldn't even occur to me. And so we're in year 6. Yeah,
yeah, 6 years,
it says poof,
no
gone.
smoking. And 10 days, we used a little bit of aid for 10 days.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And that was it. It was just done. So,
Yeah.
but as far as changing her, she just was like a freight train and hasn't stopped since as far as helping people and missions.
I'm gonna call you Mr. Conductor. Oh, well,
I'd be the
that's
conductor.
beautiful. So, Leigh-Ann, you then went to Bible college. Talk about how that came about.
I was stubborn because I went to college. I've been to college a couple of times. So the time before Bible college, I went to Stanford. I was working on my social work, so I got diploma level, and so I'd been working for the school board for about 10 years, working with high needs behavior, and I loved that job. And so, as I'm growing in the Lord and praying for, my calling, the calling that you pray that you want him to give you. Yeah, that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
And then he says, quit your job and go to Bible college. I'm like, I'm not going to Bible college. Like, I love my job. And so I really resisted for that first time. And so I applied for every permanent job at the school that I was on contract with for the September of that year. And people who had less seniority, who should have never beat me out on that, got a job. And so I finally said, okay, Lord, I'm listening. And I applied. I did miss the ticket. I did miss the ticket for the 2000, I want to say 2000, winter 2020 year. So I had to go in the fall of 2020, which, as we all know now, was the COVID years.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it was an interesting time to go to Bible college. And even as I'm walking through the doors, I was like, I don't know why I'm here. I've decided I'm going to be obedient and I'm going to follow through what the Lord has called me to, but I'm not really sure where you're taking me. And so it was a really interesting adventure. And being in the COVID years, I think that was a harder sense of where we were following. You know, the first years were on campus just 6 short weeks, and then we spent the whole year online. And that was really quite interesting. And so as I'm working through Bible college, and I really needed that foundational knowledge because I didn't grow up in a Christian environment. And so I was kind of felt like I really fit in with all of the young people that I was going to school with, right? I had the same learning level as they did, the same growing level. So God really just knew exactly what I needed from him at that time. And so I think Bible college was mostly about growing relationships and my confidence in hearing his voice. I learned surrender. I received the baptism of the Holy Spirit in Bible college, like all of those staple things that I had never had the chance to experience before happened in those, couple of years. Because it was COVID and we could only associate with each other at school, we had this incredible opportunity as a couple to open our home to all the students. And we became like the it house. Who thought I had to become a 40-year-old Christian to be cool? Like we were the it house. Everybody was coming to Leigh-Ann and Thomas's on the weekend. And we fed them in lines into the kitchen. So it was a really, really neat time. And even through that whole time, it wasn't till the very last semester that I knew where I was supposed to go after that. I had lined up an internship at a church with a friend, because that's what you did, right? That's where you did your internships. And I just never quite felt peace about it. And then I had to actually withdraw before I still didn't know where I was going and say, this is not where I'm supposed to go. I had to really just learn to wait on the Lord in that time.
During the Bible college years, did
Yeah.
you have this openness, this curiosity, this even desire to work in a church, or was that always
Never.
well?
Yeah, never. That's why it didn't make sense to me. I'm thinking Bible colleges produce pastors that stand on stages. And I just didn't. I love pastors that stand on stages. Don't get me wrong. That it has its place, it's important. But I didn't know why he would call me to do that, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. So it was one of those, okay, whatever you're doing, Lord, I call it the time of yes. I didn't know why I was saying yes. I just said, I'm going to say yes every time he asks me, and we'll see where that goes.
I think there was a Jim Carrey movie like that. But it worked out because
But it worked out.
the Lord used your willingness and your openness, and then so you were having hesitations about this internship at a friend's church, and you're putting saying, no, I don't think that's it. So then what happened?
So then actually a colleague of ours and fellow Mission Canada worker, Scott Cooper, came into chapel
Yeah.
and spoke about this new mission that he had just stepped into on the streets of Peterborough, ministering to the homeless, and I was like, it was an instantaneous moment where I'm like, oh, that's exactly what you have been preparing me for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And so, but that wasn't an easy beeline either. Scott was brand new in missions. And so when I approached him, he's like, I don't even know what I would do with the student. It was kind of like he was still getting his feet underneath him. He wasn't even sure what that would look like. And it wasn't a typical placement. through the college at that time. So I have an amazing church, and our lead pastor, Larry, agreed to take me as an intern with a partial placement with street level at that time, so that I could have this hybrid sense of learning, which ended up being very perfect for me. It was
Mm.
really cool. So I spent most of my time in my church in youth, which is another part of my heart. And then I was able to spend time a couple of days a week on the streets of Peterborough. Yeah.
Well, with the kind of work that you're doing, it's so important to understand the field that you're called to, but also how does what you're doing, how are you a bridge to the local church? And so yeah, it would be the perfect internship because you'd be getting insights that you would need in the future, right? For building bridges. Yeah. Yeah, actually, on a previous episode of this podcast, my buddy and I had come to Peterborough, and we went out with you and Scott and the team,
Mm-hmm.
and caught a bunch of video and did a whole feature. In the show notes of the podcast, I'm going to add links to that episode so that people can go and see where you cut your teeth, on street ministry. And well, actually, even before Scott, going back to your work years,
Mm-hmm.
working with people in the school board, students with behavioral issues, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you are, and going back even farther, the couple times in your young years that you were on the streets. Do you want to talk a little bit about your years on the streets? And, I think you probably saw some things that you wish you didn't see and experienced some things you didn't want to, but there might have also been um, some good things that you experienced through that as well. Just talk about the times that you were on this. You were 14 the first time that you were homeless.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
I remember the day so vividly, and I talk about it.
Yeah.
I even remember the bag. So it was a red and white soccer duffel bag. And my mom packed it up and zipped up that zipper and threw it out into the driveway. And that was that. And so I carried my little bag up to my friend's house, and I asked to stay with her and her parents. And we're talking about the 90s here. So there must be something wrong with me as a 14-year-old girl to, have their parents not want them in their home. And so I got to stay briefly, but it was almost like you feel like someone's looking for a reason for you not to stay there, right? Instead of seeing you as the child that you are, that is lacking the structure and the love and the guidance that you need in order to succeed, right? So, and that was what I was missing. Was I a perfect young teenager? No. We have 5 children. We've been doing girls for, a decade. So we understand girl teenagers. And so, we were moved around a lot as a kid. There's some mental health stuff in my family. And so I struggled as a teenager. Um, Not by any means that I shouldn't have been welcomed at home, let's say. At least if my children were me, that's the
Mhm.
context I can speak in. I wouldn't be. And so I really kind of backpacked it around from couch to couch to couch, between 14 and 16, in and out of home. Sometimes they would let me come home. Sometimes I couldn't come home. And so that's, had you sleeping in places that weren't always safe, right? With people who were far older than I was, participating in things that teenagers don't really need to see.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm gonna glaze over some things because, we want everybody to listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
A lot of the times when I speak and tell my testimony on like a Sunday, I say that, when we watch a movie and you have the little disclaimers that come up, on the top of a thing, and it's rated 18 plus due
Mhm.
to violence, language, drinking, frightening scenes. That was my life. That
Yeah.
was my life. for most of my young life.
Yeah.
Now, when I was 16, my aunt and my grandma, helped me get my stuff together, and I found a little rooming house, and I got a job. And so I pretty much have been self-sustaining since that age. But you're young and you're naive, and you find the wrong people to spend time with.
Yeah.
And so that led into being 17 with a partner who was 21. And of course, they could, buy alcohol, and, well, partying's fun, right? Because I'm a teenager now, I'm really cool. And so, which was not really cool. But so that just led into trouble, right? And I, one point when I was living on the streets, I think I was probably maybe 15 or so. My one and only criminal charge was because it was winter and it was too cold to sleep outside. So I broke into a trailer for shelter in a trailer park. And, I wasn't a criminal mastermind. So I left fingerprints. Like it was easy peasy, like lock and key. Leigh-Ann did that. Like,
Yeah.
and I didn't even, when I got caught, I didn't even deny it. And I did my community service, but it was so cold.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember finding every blanket in the trailer I could because it was that cold. I didn't want to turn the heat on because I didn't want anybody to catch me. Um, and it seems like a funny story now, but at 15, that was very real for me. And we fast forward a few years and a few mistakes and bad choices and lack of structure and routine that young people really need. I'm 21. I've left a 4.5 year abusive relationship with a spouse. I have a young daughter, and I am suffering from trauma. I can't hold a job. The wait lists for help at that age were so long. I just couldn't keep a house because if you can't keep a job, right? You couldn't get daycare. I couldn't this. I couldn't work these hours. I couldn't work those hours. So I bounced around for about 2 years. Yeah, I ended up having to ask my mom to take care of my oldest daughter for a couple of years for me because it wasn't fair to drag her through it with me. That was the hardest choice I'd ever had to make in my whole entire life. But it was best for her. So, and it took me a lot of years and a lot of programs to find the right therapy, the right, you know, therapist, the right person to work through the traumas that I had experienced from such a young age till then. And, by the time I was 25, I'd worked it out. And life
Mm-hmm.
started from there.
Mm-hmm.
I got remarried. I had some more children. It was again a poor choice because I was brand spanking new in the healthy world. But I love my girls, and being a parent to those two girls and then my stepchildren to follow when I met Thomas was a very different experience than my experience as a young person. I was doing the best I had with the life that I was handed. But sometimes the best you have with the life you were handed still doesn't meet the bar you need,
Yeah.
even if you're a good person, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we can come back in a few minutes and talk a little bit about, some of the things that you learned through therapy that stuck and helped you, and then also how your encounter with Christ solidified some things, and how you're continuing to grow. Well, we can come back to that, but I think it'd be
Sure.
good for our listeners to hear about Hope and Light Urban Outreach. Talk about the road to Cobourg, how the two of you ended up in Cobourg, which is not your hometown. Uh,
Nope.
and did either of you have any history in Cobourg before coming to set up shop?
None.
None.
None. Well, it
I've
sounds like a God
been to
thing.
the beach once.
Oh, well, yeah,
That's
that.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about Cobourg. What are some things that people need to know about the city of Cobourg?
Want to feel some of that? What have you learned since we've got there?
Uh, well, disband the encampment. Not a good point, but yeah. So they've disbanded the encampment. So and it's now illegal to camp in Cobourg. So that kind of put a lot of people out in places they don't want to be. But
So
they have
people,
since opened up 310 Division, which is a shelter, like a warming room, and then shelter upstairs. So that's kind of good.
mhm. So you're who are the people in Cobourg that how would you describe the population that you're most interested in being with?
When we came in September, we had a plan. It was all worked out. We knew exactly what we were doing and who we were going to minister to. And so we were there about a week and went, crumple it up, toss it over our shoulder, and let's reassess to a new plan.
100%.
So coming in, of course, our heart is the broken, right? The lost, the marginalized people who are really, just experiencing that hopelessness that comes with the cycles of poverty and, being unhoused and, and trauma and those kinds of things. And that is absolutely 100% still our heart. So that would be, but then there was this like split off that happened where we realized that there is so many great agencies that are already doing things that are very boots on the ground. There's this really cool community group of just residents of Cobourg that have band together to kind of form this little group of their own that meet like emergency and survival needs. So we've partnered with them. Transition House is the service provider at the shelter space. And so we've partnered with them, and they're really cool, and they have a really big heart for the work that they're doing. And their program, like the transitional housing vision, is really awesome. As a social worker, I kind of really like it. I think it's neat. And no system's perfect, but this one was pretty good. Their plan is pretty good to me anyway. And then so there's this we're feeling this divide, and I know that I can probably speak freely. I'm hoping nobody gets their feelings hurt, right? Because I mean it in the most earnest way, right? Because you can't help something if you don't understand it. So as we're walking into Cobourg, we really feel there's kind of this middle space that we want to be in between those who are on the helping side and those that I'm going to call them that are on the hurting side. So, and that hurting side sometimes can come out as anger, and sometimes it can come out as disdain, but it really comes out as I really believe people just don't understand. You need to come from a place of understanding where homelessness comes from and how that happens and how cycles of poverty, continue. So we've actually wrapped those two packages into the same vision for how we want to build relationship there, is kind of walk in this middle space and really see a community feel whole again. And we're hoping, we don't have a magic wand. We're just hoping to help with that. Be one of those, flashlights. I always talk about, the flashlight in the dark. And we're just hoping to help. But the dynamics are, interesting, like any town that has never experienced the crisis of homelessness before. Like Cobourg, it's such a small town. And so I find it really interesting that they have a small town feel, small town relationship, but this big city crisis happening. And, I think a lot of people just don't know what to do with that.
Are there a lot of people in Cobourg that work in the Greater Toronto area? And is it a retirement community? How big is Cobourg?
So from what I gather, Cobourg is around 22,000 people in its population, and that historically it has been the feel-good town, very touristy, very affluent, very retirement-based. And from what we've learned is it seems to be a lot of Torontonians are migrating, just like they are in anywhere else, into those outside communities that are just a hop, skip, and a jump up the 401 to go into work. So there is very much some city dynamic, I think, that's coming into the area. And they do describe Cobourg as being on that 401 corridor, right?
So in some respect, the whole city or the whole town of Cobourg is feeling this big shift of things probably that a lot of them don't like, uh, and also where there can be that, we call it NIMBYism, not in my backyard.
Yeah.
But then also people that are thinking more deeply are saying, well, what can we do? How do we address this? This is not our wheelhouse, and I think it's really strategic that the two of you come in to the community there, and with the eye to where is the gap, because the world between the community and social work and the consumers or the clients, the people in need. There's some big gaps in between those three silos, and to be able to prayerfully say, Lord, just show us, how can we make a difference here? And I think a lot of people are like you guys, you come into something new and you've got your plan that you end up having to crumple up and say, well, now what?
Yeah.
So, but that's a great place to be, because I think that's where we have to quiet ourselves, be able to listen to, okay, where's God leading here? What are we seeing that other people maybe aren't seeing? How do we, so talk about some of the people on the streets and in the community that you've been helping. What are some things that you're seeing? And you mentioned the encampment, and that's certainly a phenomena just across North America, particularly exacerbated by all of the shutdown stuff that happened during the pandemics and mental health crisis. But tell me some stories about the streets of Cobourg. Who are you meeting?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting time. You come into a place and you think, oh, I know homelessness. I just did 2.5 years in Peterborough, right? But the demographic in Cobourg is nothing like the demographic in Peterborough. So it is this learning understanding that the cultural, subcultural, I should say, dynamic, right, in that subculture is different in every city you may go to. And even the ways that people experience homelessness is different in every city. So coming into Cobourg, what we've learned is that, primarily it's retirees is a huge portion of the conversations that we're having and the people that we're meeting, and they just want to have a chat. And it's wonderful, and they want to tell us their stories, about their life, and where they've come from and where they've been. And we have a fella that, very intelligent, and I'm just going to say fella or lady because we're going to think of confidentiality with our friends. And worked his whole life, extremely intelligent, very educated, and even though is experiencing homelessness for the last year, is an advocate for homelessness and homelessness rights. And it is a really neat thing to watch. Very well spoken, very well written. And although he is, suffering from chronic homelessness and just can't quite get his feet under him, he understands his situation and is trying to advocate to make that better for himself and the friends that he is experiencing homelessness with. So that has been a really neat relationship to build. I'm going to let Thomas has got a couple of cool stories about are from the dog.
So two, I guess. First one is the first 3 days we attended this encampment. We had 3 different people give us their testimony on how they knew God was real. So
homeless people
never had that before.
Homeless people preaching to you.
To,
Yeah,
to
right?
us,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
So we've never
beautiful.
had that before. That was amazing to see, and that kind of give you a bit of a feeling of acceptance, right? Because they knew we were from the church, so that was their first thing, was to tell us about how they knew God was real and what He's done for them. So that was pretty amazing. Um, uh, Another fellow that I've got to become good friends with. We uh, we do lunch every couple of weeks, and I'm kind of mentoring him, but he he came to the table and I spoke to him just a little bit, but he was kind of to himself a lot. He'd just come get his stuff and take off. And so after a few days of talking with him and stuff, we'd talk a little bit more. And he had a dog, and we'd talk about the dog, which he loves, and talk about the dog and stuff. And then he said he was leaving the encampment. So um, I said, "Oh, have you got a number I can reach you at?" So he says, "Yeah, I'll give it to you in a little bit. I'll be back." So as I'm talking to the other people, the other volunteers and stuff that have known him for quite some time, they said, "He's not going to give you his number. He doesn't trust anybody." So I said, "Oh, well, hopefully he does." And whatever. He said, "Well, if he does, it won't be the right number." I said, "Okay, well, whatever. We'll just see where it goes." So as he's walking by to leave that day, he stops and he's like, "Oh, I was going to give you my number." I said, "Yeah, you were. What is it? I'll put it right in my phone right now." So, anyways, he gave me his number. Sure enough, real number. Everybody there said, "There's no way. Like, that guy doesn't trust anybody. I don't know why he's talking to you." But anyways, since then we've had quite a friendship, and I'm actually mentoring him. So now I got him telling me that he'll pray for me. So
That that's amazing, that a lot of times people have a image in their mind, or they have a picture of homelessness based on what they see from their car as they're
yeah,
driving downtown or driving around the city, or they're walking somewhere, and yet that's sometimes the visible part of homeless, but there's also a lot of invisible, isn't there, where
Yeah.
there's people you're not going to see, but they're in deep need and homeless and in encampments. And um, talk a little bit about that invisibility, and how do you how do you encounter the invisible?
Now that is the trick, isn't it? So we are spending time and pouring into a group of people who've been taught by life to trust nobody, and you can only, rely on yourself. So to kind of break into that and build that trust, so the secret spots are revealed, is the game that we play every day.
Yeah.
It does come, right? So because in right now, in the state of the way that the general population views homelessness, tenting is illegal in most cities, right? It's a bylaw, and so they're scooped up. Everything they own is thrown out. I've been watching that for years as we've ministered in the homelessness culture, um, and so they're hiding, right? And so they don't want to get caught where they are, so they kind of stay quiet about that. But and in each city is different, but in Cobourg there's a lot of people living in their cars. There is a motel program that is assisted by some housing resources through the city or county. So a lot of the little motels are filled with people that technically are sheltered, but they're not housed. And so understanding the difference between being sheltered and being housed and housing secure, so it really expands that idea of what that hidden homelessness, hidden poverty looks like. We think sitting on the corner with a cup, to be very like plain about it. We think in a tent, in the middle of a park, that's homelessness, sleeping on a park bench. But homelessness really is, I am not housing secure. So at any time, I don't know where I'm sleeping that night. And so we spent a lot of time as an extension of our outreach, finding those little pockets, people who couch surf, people who are sleeping in their cars, people who are in the motels, and that kind of stuff, and making sure, and even accessing a shelter space is hidden. Once they walk in those doors, you don't know who's in there, you don't know how many people are in there, you don't know what their needs are, because it's not in your face anymore. And so at any one time, there can be upwards around 40 or 50 people that we see in an afternoon, all hidden in their homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just to add to that, there's times when they don't want to be invisible too.
Mm-hmm.
So simply saying hello to that person on the street with the cup makes a huge deal. They just want to be seen too, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. And there's a few that want to be the center of attention, right?
That's right.
This is also true. We have met some characters in our time.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, we just met one of those the other day.
yeah. You want to talk about that, or
No, that's okay.
okay? You don't want to cross that line of
Yeah,
confidentiality.
no.
Yeah. So what are some things that personal interaction with people, coming alongside other agencies that are serving and helping them, and are there some specific things that you guys have done on your own, uh, or taken the lead in? And I know you guys are still early at it, so I don't expect that there's a long list, but what are some of the experiments in care that you've done?
Yeah, so although our focus has been partnering, it has been partnering by using our programs and initiatives to come alongside and add to what's already there and available. So Loaves of Love food security program runs 2 days a week, and feeds about 80 people
Mhm.
each week. And so that is a hope and light driven initiative on making sure that people have access to healthy meals and snacks, and those, that's really beneficial. We can't think when our belly is empty.
Right.
And when we fill our bellies with empty carbs and not nutritious meals, our body really isn't getting what it needs to do the things that we have to get to where we need to go. We have this really cool, tomorrow is our very first day. We've started a creating space art workshop within the community. And so one of our community partners has given us their space to use, because we are very mobile. We don't have a building of our own. That would be a dream when we have access to have drop in. But right now we're just having gracious people let us in their spaces. And that is amazing. So I'm hoping that we have, a good turnout, and it's just that opportunity for people just to use a different part of who they are. So if you come in, makes us all equal, right? It
Yeah.
creates dignity. We're just going to hang out together and create something beautiful. And everybody's, I've been doing art workshops for about 7 years. I've partnered with other community agencies like Community in Northumberland, and I did a group at Havelock Center in Havelock. And just that idea, when you come together, just chitty chatty and you're just making stuff, everybody's always looks different. And it's just a really cool thing that I'm excited about. And we're partnering with the community group on survival bags. So that's a big, it's definitely a collaborative effort. And I don't know that we do anything quote unquote independently, because our heart is really to build those community partnerships and relationships. Siloing sometimes is good, but when you put groups together, we're sometimes stronger than when we're working individually. And so
Right.
that's really our hope, is that we will share in the load
Mhm.
and create a stronger outreach by doing it together.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so we'll have more initiatives, I'm sure. We do boots on the ground, like outreach in the afternoons on Mondays and Thursdays. And that's kind of just Thomas and I, and we take one or two volunteers with us, which is kind of cool. So it's wellness check-ins, it's coffee if they want coffee, making sure they have just the basics of needs. You know, it seems really silly, but I feel better when I put deodorant on in the morning. Right? I feel better when I brush my teeth in the morning. And so if you don't have a penny in your pocket, do you want to talk to somebody when you smell like BO when you haven't brushed your teeth? Like, I know that seems really like a simple thing that we take for granted, but it's something that's very necessary. So we like to provide those needs to people so that they want to go out and they want to engage and they want to interact with the community because they feel confident about themselves, you know, as people.
Yeah, and you're hosting Coldest Night of the Year in Cobourg as well. Do you want to talk about that?
We are. So we're really excited. So I helped with Scott and Peterborough for the couple of years that we were teamed up together, and I really just loved it. It is a really neat event. Coldest Night of the Year is done very, very well by Blue Sea Foundation, and they kind of have this national platform for homelessness awareness. And it's this year, I think there's like 230 plus charities represented across Canada. And so we are just one of them walking in Cobourg, and it's pretty neat. It's a good opportunity to bring everybody out because it's a family friendly event. So it's not just one generation, and then you get to have that feeling of unity. Everybody walks for a different reason, but we're all there for the same reason, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about silos, and sometimes we see that in social work. Sometimes we see that in churches where there is a sense of containment where everything that they are and everything that they do gets they don't get outside the silo, right? And they don't know what's going on in the other agencies or churches, and so this is a common issue. And Thomas, you're a farmer from way back. What's supposed to be in a silo?
Corn.
Yeah, your resource, right?
Right. Yeah.
You silo your resource, but your work is out in the field, and
Right.
and
If you didn't work in
farmers.
the field, you wouldn't have anything in the silo.
That's right. You work the field so you can have a resource that you need to keep going, but also farmers are at their best when they help each other out,
Absolutely.
when they share their resources. Yeah, no, I'll come over and I'll take your oats off, and then it gets returned in another way, right? Working
Absolutely.
together, collaborating, and that really is the secret sauce of urban ministry and urban work. It's not that much different than farming. And
Nope. Good.
but Thomas, I gotta ask, like, country boy, working in it's a small city, but it's still a city, and there's still a whole lot of people in a small space. And talk to me about how you ended up transitioning. Initially, you were Leigh-Ann's support person. You were the strong arms and the shoulder to cry on, right? You know, you managed to keep the home fires while she was out on this adventure, but something's changed, and now you guys are doing this together. Can you tell me about the transition that's going on inside you? Like, I think you were a heavy equipment operator and making a living, but now you're moving to transitioning to you guys being self-supported missionaries. So tell me about that. What's going
From
on inside you,
construction.
Thomas? Are you okay?
Well, sometimes I wonder.
Very persuasive.
From construction to ministry, yeah. Actually, probably 9 years ago, before Leigh-Ann even became a missionary, um, I had this idea that I wanted to do backpacks and take them and hand them out to the homeless. And it just never really got off the ground. We did it a couple times and never really got off. And then she went to Bible college and eventually becoming a Mission Canada worker. And I was always just the background guy, like you said. That's where I'm comfortable, in the house or not in crowds or cities, and where I'm comfortable is at home. So I supported her, but in the background. And then we were actually at conference in Niagara Falls, and I started going with her when I was off for a day. If I had a rain day or whatever, and couldn't do construction, I'd go with her, and we'd feed people and do what we could. And then we were at conference in Niagara Falls, and there was missions, people talking about missions and stuff. And then in the end of it, we were doing worship, and I was baptized in the Holy Spirit by evidence of tongues. And he told me that we were supposed to do it together. Wow. And that was that. I just said, okay, let's do it.
That happened at conference?
That happened at conference, yeah. So since April, I've been full time with Leigh-Ann when she goes there, and then just kind of doing some other stuff on the side to keep the home fires burning. But yeah, so he asked, and I said yes.
It's so beautiful. Both of you are. It really is an adventure to respond to the Lord and say, okay, not my will, but your will be done. And what's that going to look like? And sometimes it's kind of sometimes it's clear and sometimes it's kind of fuzzy, but you get that sense of peace that, this is what I got to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he's taking care of his own things. Sometimes how we're going to do things and pay things, and it just ends up happening. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's taking good care of us.
Yeah, we definitely, definitely felt really a peace in his faithfulness in this season, right?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't call us to then abandon us. Right. And so, it's hard to be afraid when you find comfort in his promises, right? Mm-hmm. Fear is not of God. And so we're just kind of we just get up every day, one day at a time, and say, okay, today's the day. What do you want me to do?
Yeah. Yeah. I mentioned it earlier, and as much as you're comfortable to, Leigh-Ann, I'd like to ask you to talk about, trauma and therapy that helped you, and then also the further work of the Lord helping you, in terms of where you started out in life and the things you had to deal with early.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I tell my story, there's always this little voice in the back of my head that thinks I don't want to hurt my parents' feelings, and so I think that is a very trauma response. My dad's a wonderful man, and I love him, and our relationship is very good now. And and my mom just struggles. She just struggles, right? And mental health is definitely a huge play in that. It's put strain on a relationship. We currently don't have one, and that is a boundary thing for me in healthiness. There comes a time where you have to draw a line in the sand with abuse. And that's just kind of where I am. And so for a lot of years, I didn't really talk about my story. And even when I first became a Christian, I'm like, I would walk through the halls of the church and think, if they only knew, they wouldn't like me. They wouldn't want me here. They wouldn't trust me. They wouldn't pour into me. The enemy really whispers those lies to you when you become changed. And so I'm just learning now as I've grown and matured that I have to tell my story because it's a big story and people need to know just how amazing the Lord is. He was watching out for me before I ever even asked him to. And I believe that with every fiber of who I am. I should be dead. The things that I experienced, the situations that I put myself in, someone should have killed me, or I should have, like I shouldn't be here. And I am, and I'm grateful. And so, I think my parents did the best that they could with what they had. Right. And we're talking about a different time. We've learned a lot more about, children and trauma and those kinds of things, as the years have passed, and I'm sadly old enough now to go, 30 years ago. It's something I'm adjusting to. um, and typical teenage stuff. I mean, that part probably, it wasn't fantastic, but it wasn't as traumatic as what I usually describe as my dark years. And that really was coming out of, being 17 and getting into a relationship with a grown man who was my partner, but I was still a child. I think I kind of had this dual traumatic thing happen between being abused as a spouse, but also being abused as a young person. And so what that did to me, in my trust for the world, I just didn't have it. Right. And so when you come out of a home where you don't feel valued, you don't feel seen, you don't feel heard, your needs are never met, like emotionally. So I had no self-esteem. So going into a relationship with someone like that, um, I thought it deserved it, and I allowed it to happen. I don't I don't talk in victimization ways anymore. I maybe did once where I did allow it. I know that sometimes we get stuck in the cycle of violence that we're in, but there was a time where I broke free. So there was a time where I said, I'm not going to allow this to happen to me anymore. For me, the moment was my oldest daughter was 3, and we were standing in the kitchen. And he just done something less severe than normal. He threw a head of lettuce at my face. And I turned around, and my little girl was staring up with me. Those eyes of tears that kids get, that you could pop the tears with a pin. And I seen this flash of her being me. That was my moment. Wasn't going to do it anymore. But what I didn't understand is that it's not that simple. You don't just pack your bags and walk out the door and you're all fixed. I had bags and bags and bags and bags of emotional stuff that I had to take with me. And of course, I went back over and over and over. Um, and the last time I went back, he almost killed me. And I'm still here because a young man looked out a bedroom window and was brave enough to come out and break it up, or I wouldn't be here. Yeah, so it was pretty, and my story is not unique other than to me. That story is a story that women have all across this world. And the women that we minister to, a lot of our unhoused friends have the same story as me, and I relate to them that way. But I was lucky enough to be able to push through. I did do a lot of partying in my early 20s, trying to find the solution at the bottom of a bottle. But there's 2 types of personality in this world: an addictive personality and a not addictive personality. So I was the lucky one that when I decided to stop trying to find the answer at the bottom, it let me. And I was able to just say, not going to do it anymore, and walk away. In that process, because I said it was a big story, I had a physician at that time that misdiagnosed me with a very severe mental health disorder called borderline personality disorder. It did not fit my diagnosis, but that is the only thing people seen, and it destroyed and devastated my young life. But this is where God was watching me. Cognitive behavior therapy treats post-traumatic stress disorder, any kind of behavior disorder, any kind of, like, it all is umbrellaed in the same therapy. So that diagnosis actually saved my life, even though it caused me problems for years, because it got me into a program at that time in the early 2000s that was being ran by Whitby Psych, called the Beacon House program. It was a 12-week, half residential, half go home and try it out program where they put you in a 5-day intensive therapy. You had to, like, clean your chores, you had to be on a team for cooking. Like, it was really cool the way that they set it up. They taught structure, they taught routine. If you had conflict with another member of the house, you had to resolve that conflict in a healthy way. And they really just pounded it into you for 12 weeks. And the success rate of that program was very small. And I remember the moment where I knew my life would change. It was about week 5. And I was so anxious that the entire couch was vibrating. My whole body was shaking so much that I was moving the whole, because if I said out loud the truths that I now knew, the distortions had fallen away, then there was no going back into the hiding, into the patterns, into the destructive behaviors that I was doing because of the trauma. So I pushed through and I graduated that program, and my life changed because I found the right. And I say that very quickly, but there was 5 counselors and 12 programs and lots of falls and right, promiscuous behavior and partying and all that stuff that comes when we're trying to hide, right? People see, when you see a person who's struggling, they see the behavior and then make an assumption on the person. I'm a good person. I was a good person then, that was running from my brokenness and doing the very best I could to deal with that, right? And so often it's not, the surface is not the value. And so by going through those programs and really getting my life back, so I tell it now is that I needed therapy to deal with my heart, and then, or to deal, sorry, let me rephrase that, to deal with my head. And then I found Jesus and he fixed my heart. And so I carried the shame and the guilt and the, you know, the losses and all of that stuff with me from 25 to 35, right? The bitterness, the unforgiveness, it was all stuck there. I was carrying around like sandbags tied around my neck. So I never really got a full life, even though I learned how to be functional because I had fixed, right? They taught me how to have a life. I didn't have a full life. And then, you know, Jesus has taught me to forgive. And he's taught me to not be ashamed of a life that was handed to me, that I did the best I could with. And so sometimes we can't go backwards. But, you know, my grandma, who was one of my favorite people in the whole world, she used to say, today is always the first day of the rest of your life. And so that has kind of been a mantra for me for most of my life. And I'm really just thankful, right? And so I tell you one story about forgiveness, about the way that Jesus works and the coolness in that. So we were only Christians like a couple of months, and we're at we're at one of those, you know, in-house church retreats. And the fellow that was speaking went through the whole weekend, and at the end of the weekend, you know, he tells us to bow our heads. We're going to have a prayer of forgiveness. And I'm like, okay, man, that list is big. I'm thinking in my mind, because you go through all these things. This person hurt me and this person did this. And we hold all that stuff, right? And so I bow my head, and Thomas and I are standing side by side. You know how we always hold on to the back of the chairs in our churches, and you're just kind of hanging out. And I'm praying away. And then a feeling come over me, kind of like when you are almost asleep and then you get jolted away. You feel like you're falling out of bed. And I thought that I had stumbled when I was standing and lost my balance with my eyes closed. And so I said nothing because I'm so mortified, and I scurry out because we barely knew anybody church at that point, get in the car, and I said, did you see that? I was so embarrassed. I thought that, you know, did anybody see me stumble? And Thomas says to me, you didn't move. But I had been rocked to my core. Like I felt my body move. And so I go home, and I'd had this pain in my back for years. And I wake up the next day, doesn't hurt. I'm like, what? And I'm thinking, oh, I'm having a good day. And then a week goes by, and a month, and we're in year 6. And I've never had the same pain returned. And so when I spoke with a mentor, they said, you know, he literally must have come right down, just plucked all that unforgiveness right out of your soul. And I can talk about my trauma, but I can't muster up bitterness for them anymore. It just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in my soul. And I'm so grateful for that. That's the power of Christ, right? We can fix our mind.
Yeah.
Therapy's, I think that we should. I think when you have trauma, when you've experienced living rough, when you've had a hard life, I think that you should speak to somebody. But there's this beautiful merging between mental health and faith that is so beautiful, at least in my life, that it's been that beautiful. You know, they go really well together. And I feel this wholeness now in my 40s that I didn't have before.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Leigh-Ann, and thank you for just opening up about it that way. That really is a gift that God has placed in you to be able to tell your story in the most appropriate way you can. I'm thinking about that proverb that says that a merry heart does good like a medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. And your um, healing that was tied to forgiveness in your back.
Mhm.
Like there's that I don't have a scientific medical explanation. I don't know if anybody can really, well, you see, it's because, that doesn't matter. What matters is that you said, yeah, I want to be a forgiving person. I want to forgive. And you took it to the Lord, and he said, okay, well, while we're at it, this thing that's been hurting you all this time, this bitterness, let's just take that away.
Mhm.
Wow. And he's given you guys a calling to be with people who are traumatized.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's not a mistake. You know, I talk about my life, and some people will be like, "Oh," and I think it's less shocking to me because it was my life.
Yeah.
But I really believe that there's purpose in that, right? If I changed any one moment, I wouldn't be who I am, who he's called in this season to do what he's called us to do,
Mm.
to work through us in this way. I'm able to relate to people in a way that is very personal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a very good gift that he's given me.
Yeah. So what compared to the old days, who's this new creation? What did you do with Leigh-Ann? Where is she?
So she's still in there. She's still in there. So I don't think that Lord and I know that that's one of my favorite scriptures in Corinthians where it talks about, like that we're new creation in Christ. And I think that he doesn't necessarily wipe out our whole personality. He gave that personality to me. I'm still vibrant. I'm still bossy. I'm still boisterous sometimes, right? Um, I'm still, as he said, a freight train on a path. When I want to do something, I put all my eggs in the basket and away I go. Like I'm very driven. I think what he's done is he's taken all of that and just polished the edges like marble, right? Just softened, a life, living on the street, fighting for territory, fighting for, cred. Like it's been a long time since I had to worry about that stuff, but all that stuff that comes with a rough life, right? And I think it hardens your heart in a sense because you need to be tough. Like you can't trust anybody and you can't, all of those can'ts. The longer I serve the Lord, the more those melt away, the more he takes those out of my vocabulary and the more he softens the heart to who he originally created me to be in the first place. I wasn't born hard,
Yeah.
right? I wasn't born tough. I wasn't born a street fighter and a swearer and a drinker and all of those things. And so as he heals me and he works on me, he teaches me how to go back to the way he meant me to be. If that makes sense,
It
and
does.
that is that new creation, right? Because we're in him in that. And I didn't have that without him.
Right. Right. Hey, one more thing, as we come to a conclusion on uh, our conversation, and that is, I'd like to invite one of you or the other or both to lead everybody that's listening to the podcast or those that'll end up seeing it on YouTube. They'll um, as the communication happens and people are listening. I want to invite people everywhere to take this moment and pray alongside you as you pray for the street affiliated people in Cobourg. Would you do that? Would one of you or both just lead us in a prayer for the streets of Cobourg?
Sure. Yeah, I'll totally do that. That would be great. Oh Lord, we just come before you. We leave behind any of our own ideas, our own will, our own plans. We just ask you to show us all that you have planned for Cobourg. We offer ourselves up to you, Lord, in service and surrender, to be giving and free of your love, to see everyone as you see them. I want, Lord, to have a heart for people that is your heart. I want you to lay their names and their lives on my heart to serve in the way that you call me to, with no preconceived notions, no personal ambitions, just in love, in grace and mercy.
Mm-hmm.
I pray for those who are currently experiencing homelessness, who are currently feeling lost and broken and in search of something more, that they may find you, Lord, that may come to know you through the ministry that we are doing in your name. And may everything that we do bring glory to you, and may we do nothing for our own benefit. Can you bring in partnerships as we need them? Can you give us the sense of preparation and urgency that we need to fulfill the purposes that you have called us to? May you put our names on the hearts of others so that they may know to pray for us. Even if they have no idea who we are, they should just stop in a moment of their day and pray, because you called our names to them. I pray for the town of Cobourg, and that they may feel wholeness in this time of crisis and chaos, and this new, for lack of a better word, lifestyle that we find ourselves in. We're a world where tent cities exist, in a world where people can't find shelter, where people can't find enough food. We will bring all the resources that you can bring into the Cobourg area for those who need to access those services. May the workers from each agency that they meet up with, that they call, that they email, and that they see, know what they need and provide it for them, because the resources will be abundant and overflowing in this town. And may we be just a part of your business in every conversation, interaction that we have. We do all of these things in your name, in your glory, and for you in your will. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And just as I was praying along, God was reminding me of that population in my city and the efforts that go on here. So thank you for being that trigger for prayer everywhere that this podcast is heard. And I do want to thank you both for being on today. It was great to be with you. And also I want to mention that in the show notes, I'll include a link to your Mission Canada page so that those that might feel that would be worthwhile can become a monthly supporter or send a donation to help you guys. The goal is that you're both able to be doing this full time, and if we can, that's going to take people who say, yeah, I want to be a partner with Thomas and Leigh-Ann. I want to support what they're doing. So thank you for sharing so openly with all that you're doing.
Thanks for having us,
Kevin.
On my next episode, I'm going to be going back to Windsor and interviewing a newlywed and newly parent couple who are business entrepreneurs. Mike DeFazio has an intriguing story on his journey to faith, and then his girlfriend, Lisa. There's an intriguing story of her putting her faith into cold storage because of things that she had been through in church, and how God ended up using her boyfriend's journey to warm her up and restore her to a living faith. And their journey together is filled with some incredible miracles. And we're also going to get to hear the story of how when they got married, how the Lord opened her womb. They'd been trying to have a baby, and it was an impossible thing, but God. And so that's a great story coming up on the next episode, which is February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day. So until the next time that you tune into this podcast, I want to thank everybody that's taken the time to listen. If you haven't, click like and subscribe, and leave comments because that helps the podcast to get shared to a larger audience. Until the next episode, you've been listening to Sidewalk Skyline podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Rogers. And if you're looking for a country boy, give Leigh-Ann a call. She can give you some advice.
Studio 61.